Good morning, everyone. As a reminder, please silence all electronic devices or switch them to airplane mode. Thank you in advance for keeping this respectful, safe, and keeping this a safe civil forum space. Before we begin, I want to invite our Spanish-speaking community members to check in with our interpreters who are seated right over here for instructions and equipment that will allow you to hear the forum in Spanish. Welcome to the Boulder Mayoral Candidate Forum, sponsored by the League of Women Voters, partnering with the Emergency Family Assistance Association. My name is Martine Eleanor. I am a proud member of the League, and I am pleased to serve as moderator for today's forum. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. For over 100 years, we have encouraged informed and active participation in government and influenced public policy through education and advocacy. To remain nonpartisan, the League never supports or opposes political candidates or parties. Now to the forum. For the November 7th, 2023 municipal election, Boulder voters will be asked to elect a mayor. In the 2020 general election, over 78% of voters in the city of Boulder voted in favor of having registered voters decide their mayor through instant runoff ranked choice voting. The first election of the mayor through ranked choice voting, also known as RCV, is set to take place this election. Ranked choice voting is a voting method that allows voters to rank election contest candidates in order of preference when there are 3 or more candidates. For more information on ranked choice voting, please go to Boulder County's election website, bouldercountyvotes.gov, or you can read the colored insert included with your ballot. We also have copies downstairs. Note that because the city elections are moving to even-numbered years, the term of this mayor will be 3 years, not 4. The format for today's forum will be as follows. Each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement. We will then begin with questions that have been submitted online to the League by the community and by the audience. Audience members may submit questions by writing them on index cards available from our volunteers. Questions will be reviewed by our League of Women Voters volunteer screeners for clarity and may combine several similar questions into one question on that topic. We will try to ask the candidates as many questions as time permits. We will share questions that were not asked with the candidates. For most questions, each candidate will have up to 1 minute. However, I may expand the time to answer depending on the question. This forum is being recorded for live streaming and broadcast on Channel 8. Please refrain from clapping, booing, or otherwise showing your approval or disapproval of any response. Please respect the candidates and honor the dignity of democracy. Disruptions will only delay the forum. The candidates are seated in the order in which they will appear on the general election ballot. Now to the opening statements and questions. For the opening statements, we will begin with candidate Brockett.
Good morning, everyone. It is wonderful to be here with you today. My name is Aaron Brockett, and I am the current mayor of Boulder. I've been on the Boulder City Council for 8 years and mayor for the last 2. Let me just say how glad I am that we're having Spanish interpretation here today. Muchas gracias a las intérpretes. And I've lived in North Boulder for 20 years with my wife and 2 kids, and a former software developer and small business owner. And it has been the honor of my life to be your city councilor and mayor. I've done that work very hard each and every day, getting out there in the community, meeting with regional leaders and such. I think part of that, the job I've done is demonstrated in part by some of the endorsements I've gotten, including our governor, our state treasurer, 11 state legislators, 8 area mayors, and numerous current and former city council members. So if you will support me in this election, I promise to continue doing this work to represent the community as hard and as equally and fairly as I can with equity and inclusion. Thank you so much for being here.
Candidate Spear.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. I'm Nicole Spear. I'm a scientist, a mom, a current city councilwoman, and a union worker. I'm the daughter of an immigrant and a veteran. I've been leading teams for 30 years, and I've been involved in city policymaking for 2 years. Most importantly, I have decades of experience living in some of the inequity created by our city's policies. As a working mom, trying to find and afford childcare, housing, and healthcare. As a daughter, trying to find support for low-income elderly parents, especially when English isn't their first language. As a queer woman, trying to find spaces that feel truly safe. And as a white homeowner, knowing how much better this city works for my family than for others. Most of us have leadership experience, but not all of us have lived experience with the negative impacts of our policies. As mayor, I'll use the experiences that made my life more challenging to make my life better for all of us. Thank you.
Candidate Yates.
Good morning. My name is Bob Yates. I have served for the last 8 years on Boulder City Council, and I seek to be your first directly elected mayor. More than 1,000 residents have already endorsed me. You're going to hear a number of questions this morning on substantive matters, on crime and homelessness, on transportation and housing. And I think you're going to find that our answers are relatively similar on those substantive questions. But also what you're listening for this morning is leadership. That's what a mayor really is a leader. I have more than 40 years of experience in the business world with local nonprofits, and for the last 8 years on the City Council as a leader. I hope that you will elect a mayor who will lead City Council well, but also someone you'll be proud of, as that person represents us around town and outside the city. I do believe that leadership matters, and I hope that you will elect a leader. Thank you.
Candidate Tweedley.
Good morning. My name's Paul Tweedley. I live here in Boulder on 4th Street for 20 years. I'm an engineer. I've got 35 years of experience developing software for aerospace industry companies. I don't have any political experience. Why am I running for mayor? 2 reasons. 1, nothing works anymore. Like not even the microphones. I'm an engineer. I could fix this. Second of all, I was coming over the bridge there, I was parked at the library, and what do you see? It's just like the homeless camps there. It's so unsightly. And then we've got 4 police officers over there in the bike paths having a little conference. This has to stop. We can't keep going, kicking the can down the road. We need to take care of this now.
For the first question, we will begin with Candidate Spear. What are the most important challenges facing Boulder, and how should the mayor address them?
Thank you. I think many of our challenges can be summed up under one word, which is affordability. It is getting harder and harder for so many people to live in this community, to raise children, to live on fixed incomes, to get around in a city that is increasingly inaccessible for people who are living with disabilities. And I think some of the things that this council has started that we unfortunately will not see kind of come to fruition until years later, things like the Guaranteed Basic Income pilot program, which is going to make a large difference for many people in our community. We've started the process, so I wish we could have started a little bit sooner, of increasing our minimum wage, which will make it more affordable for folks to live here. And we've made a lot of changes that in time will address our affordable housing crisis. So we are moving in the right direction, but we really need to do more with increasing wages and making it more cost effective to live here. Thank you.
Candidate Yates.
I believe that our community's most pressing need is public safety. public safety. This includes ensuring that our community spaces are clean and safe, that our criminal laws are enforced, and that our homes and businesses are protected from fires and floods. As Boulder's first directly elected mayor, it will be my responsibility to listen to diverse opinions on our city council and in the community. This will help us reach consensus on the best ways to address threats to our safety and to our happiness. I do believe that leadership matters. Together with the right leader, we can make Boulder a safer home for all of us. Thank you.
Candidate Tweedley.
Yes, I agree with Bob. I mean, we'll have to respect our laws and make sure that people understand if you come here, you will be held accountable. I mean, if visitors are so welcome and they love Boulder so much, especially at this time of year, with the trees down there by the creek. But you know, if you're a visitor to Boulder, welcome. If you break our laws, well, if it's a misdemeanor, you'll be fined. If you don't pay your fine, you'll go to jail. It's very simple. I mean, it's not rocket science, but we do have to enforce it. We have to make sure that everyone involved, from the, from the police on the line to the mayor, maybe the mayor as well, the DA and the judges, they all have to be on the same page. Thank you.
Yes, please speak clearly and move closer to the mic.
And if anyone who isn't speaking can turn off their mic as well, that'll help.
All right.
Please hold while we fix that.
But it's not just the sound, it's the quality. There's a lot of buzzing in everybody's mic, including moderators.
Yeah. And echoes. Echoes, yeah.
Yeah, we've been having some sound issues in council chambers, and my technical people are back there in that area. So I can give them that information, but right now we have to work with what we have. I'm sorry. We had to do that with the council meetings as well. So I'm trying to fix it, I'm trying to make it better, but our equipment is old, so we're still trying to work through that. So give me a few minutes. Hopefully we can keep it moving. If somebody would say something, let me hear how it sounds if you talk a little louder, talking to the microphone.
Good morning, everyone. It's buzzy.
That's better, but it's just
No, it's buzzy. So even when I'm speaking right into the mic, unfortunately.
no, because then they won't be able to record it. Unless you want to use the recording. Unless you want to hear the mic. I mean, I can hear it on the TV and I can hear it in the back, but
Is this mic any better?
No, it's not.
no. No, it's just that buzzing.
And echo from the calls. Maybe
How about this? How about we do our best to be close to the mic and speak clearly? And hopefully that helps a little bit.
very unenjoyable.
It's outside of my spectrum of expertise.
Let's see, is this any better? A little bit better? Okay, maybe 2 inches away. Maybe 2 inches away from the mic. Does that work for everybody? Okay, we'll do our best. For the next one, we'll start, or rather, to finish off the first question, we'll move on to candidate Brockett.
Clearly, AV problems are the biggest issues facing our community. Now, rising levels of unsheltered homelessness are right up at the top, and we need better solutions for these problems. And so that's something that the mayor should be working on from a policy perspective and from a leadership perspective. We do have some new solutions coming online, but we need a lot more, particularly in the area of mental health and substance abuse treatment. Also, affordable housing. Things are way, way, way too expensive, and we need to make sure that there's housing available for people from a wide range of incomes and backgrounds and ethnicities. So we've been doing a a lot of work on that, but more progress needs to be made. And then I'll also mention resilience in the face of climate change. The fires and the floods are only going to get worse. And so we need to have an all-hands approach on deck to make sure that we're protecting our communities from the warming world and the disasters to come. Thank you.
For our next question, we'll start with candidate Yates. This question was submitted by the Emergency Family Assistance Association, our community partner for this forum. Human service organizations are under great strain right now. The Colorado Center on Law and Policy estimates that a quarter of all Boulder County households cannot make ends meet without public and private assistance. If elected, what would you prioritize to address this situation?
Thank you. Let me mention several programs, many of which were started during my 8 years on City Council, and all of which I want to continue and expand on. First is a program called Keep Families Housed, where we provide EFA with $400,000, and they then in turn provide that to families to help them stay in their homes. And we just renewed the 2024 budget on Thursday to continue that program. Second, we have an eviction defense and rental assistance program that provides $500,000 to households to prevent evictions, and we have a very high success rate in that. 70% of those families were allowed to stay in their houses. Third, Nicole mentioned a guaranteed income program that is being piloted right now that provides up to $500 a month for low-income families. We want to evaluate that pilot next year and decide whether we want to continue it and expand it. Fifth, we have a food rebate tax program, which I think is outstanding, where we give back some of the sales tax that low-income families pay. And then finally, we have a senior property tax reductions. I think those are all wonderful programs. I hope that we continue them, that we expand them, and that we get creative on other ways to help people.
Candidate Tweedley.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that. A quarter of families are struggling in Boulder. That's not good. You know, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of programs, but how are these programs paid for? Well, I guess it comes out of our taxes. So it's like, you know, you're stealing from Peter to pay Paul. Why not just cut taxes? And then the families wouldn't be struggling. Well, I don't know. There might be less that are struggling. So if I'm elected mayor, one of the things I would do is cut property taxes. I think I've said this before. If you have one child, 25% rebate. 2, 50. 3, 4, you're not paying any property taxes. That's going to encourage families to come and thrive in Boulder.
Candidate Brockett.
Yeah, well, Councilmember Yates listed a number of programs, which I will also mention. And I'll just mention that when the eviction prevention program came to us, that was a citizen ballot initiative, and I coordinated with the organizers of that to add rental assistance as a piece of that, and was very pleased that our colleagues accepted that and that the voters approved that. And the Keep Families Housed, the EFA runs that program, is such a good program. And we did actually, just 2 nights ago, approve an increase in our city's assistance for that program, because it's critical to do just that. Because I talked earlier about homelessness, and the very best way to work with homelessness is to prevent it from ever happening in the first place. So those eviction prevention programs are so critically important. And one other thing I'll mention, though, is that it needs to be on the income side as well, that often people are struggling to afford for rent and basic needs because they're not making enough money. So I fully support raising the minimum wage in the city of Boulder next year in partnership with a consortium of other cities around the region. Thank you.
Candidate Spear.
Thank you. I will just echo a couple of things that my colleagues have mentioned already. Some of the eviction prevention basic needs assistance programs, they really do work, and it's a very small investment that can help prevent homelessness for years to come. Raising the minimum wage, it is not, we do not have enough money for many people to live in our community and afford the costs of housing, healthcare, childcare. Advocating for a child care district to provide free child care to families in Boulder County. That's a really important one, and I hope the commissioners will continue considering it. Continuing increasing funds for basic needs assistance, continuing getting more money for affordable housing, as this council is moving forward with in looking for funds from folks who are doing large remodels on their homes and taking some of that money for affordable housing. But the need is now, and policy change takes time. So folks in the community who can give should give to all of these organizations that are helping people in our community right now. Thank you.
For the next question, we'll start with candidate Tweedley. Aside from sales tax increases, what ideas do you have for funding the necessary and desired programs for the city into the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm one of these few people from Boulder who I don't like paying taxes. I don't like paying sales taxes. Like, the sugar tax that we have here. What are we paying now for a soda fountain drink? Like $2 or something like that. Whereas if you just drive up to the McDonald's there in Longmont, it's a lot cheaper there. So that's where I go. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think it's my job to know it. It's like, businesses have to, we could give them property taxes. That might give them a little chance to sort of make a buck. But, it's up to them to actually come up with ideas. Thank you.
Candidate Brockett.
Yeah, we're fortunate that the city is in a relatively stable and solid financial situation right now. So we're in pretty good shape, but there are still a lot of unfunded needs. There's actually a tax on the ballot this fall that hopefully people will support to extend an existing tax for general fund and arts funding purposes. But that's a sales tax. I wasn't supposed to talk about that. A couple of other things, though. One is there potential for fees to be a source of revenue. Right now, for transportation, we get most of our funding from the gas tax. But a much more efficient way of taxing transportation would be a vehicle miles traveled tax instead, that would spread out the burden more equitably among road users and would also provide some additional funding for critical transportation needs. And another one I'll mention, this is currently not allowed by the state, which is a real estate transfer tax. In other states, this has been used to fund affordable housing. Would love to see a ballot measure at the state level to repeal the prohibition of a real estate transfer tax. I'm looking at you, Judy Amavle, representative. Maybe we can get that passed in the legislature. Thanks so much.
Candidate Spear.
So we're beginning some of the longer-term work as a city to find more sustainable, equitable, and resilient sources of funding for the city because we are too reliant on sales tax at the moment. So that work will be moving forward, and this next council will have a large role in shaping it. Some of the things that I would love to see us doing, so right now the state prevents us from doing any kind of local income tax. I think that income taxes are actually important for folks who are making a lot of money. They can afford to give a little bit more to the people who aren't. We can look at taxes and fees on second, third, fourth homes that people have in the city and generate more funding for affordable housing and other basic needs there. We can look at fees as we're doing on people who are building larger single-family homes. We can also look at fees on corporations that don't pay their workers a living wage. Because of corporations, large ones especially, that are making millions of dollars in profits every year, we're paying their workers a living wage. Many people in our community would be in a better place.
I'm going to give you an answer
Candidate Yates.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to give you an answer that's probably not really popular, but it's honest, and I always want to be honest with you. Nicole and I serve on the Financial Strategy Committee, basically the Finance Committee for City Council, and one of the things that we've been talking about, and one of the things I feel very passionately about, is the fact that our mix between sales tax and property tax is imbalanced. Colorado has the 5th lowest property tax in the nation, and our sales tax is about average. But the problem with sales tax, which is the largest funder of city government, is that it's unreliable. It's highly volatile. We saw that during COVID. We saw that in the recession prior to that, and it's really up or down. And what happens is when our sales taxes are down, we have to furlough employees, we have to cut back services, and it's very miserable for all of us. And so what I'd like to see is a shift away from sales tax. We'll still have sales tax as a basis, and a corresponding increase in property taxes. Again, I know that's not popular, and we can make this zero sum so the pain is equivalent. But nice thing about property taxes is they're stable. They're not regressive, they're fair, and they provide stability. Thank you.
Next question for candidate Brockett. Tell us about a time when you were able to reach a compromise between people with opposing viewpoints and they were satisfied.
Well, let's see. Well, the compromise where everyone comes out satisfied. I don't know how many of those happen, but I'll mention where one recently where I think things came out pretty well, which was the sales tax I was just referencing. We had a group of people in the arts community who gathered signatures to repurpose our general fund tax 100% to arts. And they came to City Council and said, we've got the signatures, you need to put it on the ballot. One potential was we could have put 100% dedication to general fund on the ballot as well, and we could have fought it out in the court of public opinion. Instead, I and some others sat down with the organizers of that petition and said, 100% is too much. We're going to have to cut city services. But if we did 50% dedication to the arts, that actually wouldn't require any cuts to city services because of the savings from the library district being funded. So they agreed to that compromise, that 50-50 compromise, and that's now on the ballot. And I think it's a great compromise. They're happy. A majority of city council is happy, not everyone. But I think it's going to pass, and I think it'll be a good thing for the community, the arts community, and the community as a whole going forward. Thanks.
Candidate Spear.
Thank you. I will echo that I'm not sure everybody is always entirely satisfied, but I think that if you're at least willing to listen, to talk, to allow people to be heard, you get to a place where people can walk away feeling okay and ready to head into the next big decision. The thing that I am thinking about is last year, one of my work plan priorities coming onto this council was moving our city council elections to even years when more than 17,000 people are voting on local issues. It's an important time for electing local issues. I had wanted to try that earlier for 2024. Not all of my colleagues agreed, so we talked. Bob actually was the one who came up with the winning solution of how to do that, to have us starting in 2026 and get there with elections in 2023 and 2025 that would have shorter terms for some of the council members. So I think this is a place where council came together, and even, ultimately, I don't think Bob voted for that, but he still had a hand in shaping it. And that's how, by having all of our voices heard, we can really get to solutions that people can be okay with.
Thanks, Nicole.
Candidate Yates.
Oh, I'm sorry. I want to jump in. Thank you, Nicole. We're kind of professional disappointers. Our goal every Thursday night is to annoy as many of you as possible. And I say that only facetiously, but often the community is divided. Often the community has difference of opinion. And we listen to everyone, and then we collaborate, as Nicole said, and try to come up with a solution that everyone can live with. And one I can think of in particular is back in 2018, we were reforming our rules around accessory dwelling units, ADUs. In the community, here in the council chambers, we had dozens and dozens of people who came and told us what a horrible thing would happen if we made changes to the accessory dwelling unit rules and how the wheels were going to fall off and we were going to destroy this community. But we collaborated as a council. We came forward with some good rules and some good changes to that. We asked the community to give us a little bit of time, a little bit of grace, and try it out. And sure enough, here we are 5 years later. I don't hear a peep from the community. Everyone seems to be happy with it. Those who want accessory dwelling units can use them for a aging parent or a boomerang child, and others can live peacefully with their neighbors. So it came out really, really well. Thank you.
Candidate Tweedley.
Yes, you're always going to have opposing views. And, what can we do? It's funny, when I was speaking to my mum, I only announced my candidacy a week before the deadline. My mum lives in Scotland as well. You should hear her accent. So anyway, I said to her, Mum, I'm running for mayor. She says, what? She said, I know, Mum. And I was saying to her, Mum, diplomacy, that's not my strong suit. She said, yeah. I said, so what can I do? All right, Paul, here's what you do. You present your arguments, and then you listen, right? You listen, and then you zip it.
For the next question, we'll start with Candidate Spear. What do you believe should be the relationship between city government and the police oversight panel?
Thank you for this question. I think that the ordinance change that we just passed on Thursday night is a really good step toward where we need to be headed. The community absolutely needs to have a voice and a role in police oversight. And the city, as the group that is responsible for policing, also needs to play a role in that. This recent process we went through, a group of folks from the city and the community and impacted communities, as well as some members of the police oversight panel, came together and spent hours together every week for 4 months, coming up with a set of policies that would influence how we do police oversight moving forward. It's not perfect, but it is a step in the right direction, and we got there because of all the different voices we included and all the conversations that were had in that space. I think it's a really nice change, and I think it reflects kind of the future of where we're headed. Thank you.
Just testing my mic. Can everybody hear me? Okay, thank you. And I'll try to speak up. Thank you. Candidate Yates.
Well, this almost goes back to the last question about how we collaborate with each other and then how we collaborate with the community. And as Nicole said, I think it was a beautiful thing on Thursday night as we came together and unanimously approved some improvements and changes to our police oversight panel law so that our police oversight panel can do their jobs. It's an independent organization. You ask about the relationship between the city and the police oversight panel. It should be an independent panel. We have an independent police monitor, and then we have an independent group of residents who help us ensure that we have good policing in our community. When you have bad policing, it's a horrible situation. We've given these people guns, and we've given them the authority to arrest people. And when you have bad policing, we've seen it around the country, it can be a very, very horrific situation. Conversely, when we have good policing, we all feel safe. We all feel safe and protected. We know that crime will be prevented, and when a crime occurs, that there'll be consequences. And so I think that our police oversight panel will help us ensure that we have good policing in our community. Thank you.
Candidate Tweedley.
Yeah, when was the Police Oversight Committee, when was that established? Was it last election? Was it 2020? All right. Yeah, I was reading the paper this morning that another guy has resigned. It's like, what's going on in that panel? I don't know, is it our business? Do we need an oversight panel? Maybe we do. How does that fit in with the city council? I don't know. Just let them do their jobs.
Candidate Brockett.
Yes, I think civilian police oversight is an important function in a community of the size of ours, right? That you want a set of outside eyes. I think we have an exemplary police department. And I think our current police chief, Mayor Harold, has been moving that in a positive direction. I think the culture of the department is in good shape. But we're all human, right? Everybody makes mistakes, and sometimes the policies and procedures need some updating as well. So having a group of outside, completely independent folks looking at the actions of the police and at the policies and procedures of the police, I think is a really healthy part of the system. And unfortunately, the panel has had some very serious growing pains with a lot of controversies and issues. But it really was inspiring to see the work that the working group did to suggest revisions, to depoliticize the panel appointment process, and to improve the working of the process overall. And while there continues to be some level of disagreement, it was really wonderful to see that entire working group agree, and then for council to unanimously pass almost exactly what they suggested to us with just a couple of minor changes. It was, I think, a great example of government in action functional.
For the next question, we'll start with Candidate Yates. What steps do you recommend to increase Boulder's resilience in the face of natural disasters and other destructive events?
Yeah, I'm going to rattle through 5 things real quick. As mayor, I will encourage my council colleagues and city staff to do 5 things. Number 1, we need to prioritize flood mitigation work so that our limited resources go to those projects that can save the most lives. Number 2, we need to ensure that every property owner has access to an on-site evaluation by the fire department so that plantings and debris are appropriately managed to reduce the risk of fire. Number 3, I want to use the upcoming extension of Boulder's franchise agreement with XL Energy to require more rapid undergrounding of overhead power lines. Number 4, I want to insist that new housing and business construction follow best practices in spacing and materials to reduce fire risk. And finally, number 5, I would like to go back to 4th grade. Remember we used to do fire drills? I'd like to do neighborhood fire drills. I'd like to have neighborhood by neighborhood. We'll pick a Saturday morning, and let's plan our exits and our escapes from our respective neighborhoods so that when a disaster does happen, we all know what to do. Thank you.
Candidate Tweedley.
Evacuating a Sunday morning? What if the Buffs are playing? I'm not evacuating, Bob. So I'm an engineer, right? And we're used to being held accountable. And I've got a certain level of expertise, but in a very specific field. What I don't know anything about is wildfire mitigation, flood mitigation. But fortunately, we're fortunate here in Boulder to have experts that are. So we have to listen to the professionals and trust their judgment.
Candidate Brockett.
Well, I'll say, Bob, that was a very good list. So great, those are great points there. Just to build on that a little bit, in terms of flood mitigation, we have currently a decades-long process of creating flood mitigation for all of our waterways in town. And we need to continue with strong support from the City Council on that. Often those encounter strong opposition within the community to one aspect or another. We need to collaborate with the community on those, but still have the political will to implement those life-saving projects where they are so desperately needed. And also on emergency response, we've seen in some of the recent major fires, particularly like the NCAR fire, which was just south of town, that there was confusion about exactly who should evacuate and where they should evacuate to. So we need to make sure that we have very clear plans that are well communicated to the community ahead of time and that everyone is aware of the needs at the time that a potential disaster occurs. And finally, I think it's time to look at updating our building codes for more fire-safe building codes. Some communities in the wildland-urban interface have very strong building codes, and we should look at updates that we should take here locally as well. Thanks.
Candidate Spear.
Thank you. And thanks to the voters for approving our climate tax last fall, because that really has given us a lot more resources to move forward with creating climate resilience in our community. One of the things that I think is so critically important, and I just want to echo what my colleagues up here have said in terms of the work the city is continuing to do to make sure we're prepared for these natural disasters that will come. But when these disasters hit, it's typically the people who are lowest income in our community who are the most impacted. And this is where, for me, climate justice becomes a priority in all of our climate work, because the lowest income people are the people least responsible for the climate crisis, because their emissions are so much lower than more affluent people. And I think that instills in a city a responsibility to work with communities that have been historically marginalized to make sure that they are resilient and prepared. And a lot of the work that we're starting to do in our climate initiatives team is doing exactly that. So empowering our city to work with historically marginalized communities will help.
For our next question, we'll start with candidate Tweedley. What steps will you take to ensure that middle-income workers in Boulder can afford to live here rather than commute? This would help to ease traffic and improve our air quality and climate.
Yeah, they're getting kind of squeezed. And I think there's multiple approaches we can take. Affordable housing so that families can afford to actually stay here in Boulder. That's critical. But how do we keep it affordable? Here's an idea to see what you think. So we create a new rule. If you're selling a house in Boulder, you can only sell it to a fellow resident of Boulder. Well, a resident, well, how do we define residency? Well, just the usual way. I think that would help ease the pressure, and stop the billionaires coming in from California and buying up, their mansions. So I think that's an idea worth exploring, just to help keep a cap, because it would help cap rents as well as properties.
Candidate Brockett.
Well, one program we've just brought online this year is the Middle Income Down Payment Assistance Program, which will help middle-income families purchase their own house and then permanently deed restrict that house for middle-income owners. So excited about that program. But another key piece here, I think, is redeveloping some of our aging strip malls and older business centers into vibrant, mixed-use, walkable, bikeable neighborhoods with a big chunk of affordable housing included in them as well. And so we've been moving in that direction in East Boulder with some big moves in the East Boulder Sub-Community Plan and Boulder Junction area, which I think are very promising. And we have another large opportunity in the Area 3 Planning Reserve that we're going to take up at the Comprehensive Plan in a couple of years. And so this is an area north of town where the city actually already owns much of the land. And so we have the ability to create large quantities of housing that's affordable to middle-income folks. So those are a few of our opportunities to improve things. Thanks.
Candidate Spear.
Thank you. I will echo what Erin just said and also build on some of these things I mentioned earlier about the need for a child care district. One of the big costs for many middle-income earners in our community is childcare, and if we can work on making childcare more affordable and more prevalent, that will start to help a lot of people in our community have more money to pay for some of their other basic needs. Some of the things this council has done around creating more affordable and more middle housing will help in time. But it's things like it's things that offset the costs that people are experiencing right now that are going to help in the near term. So I would like to see us continue to work on things like relaxing single-family zoning so that we can create more smaller units that by their nature can be more affordable. And I would really love to start incorporating more middle-income earners into some of these conversations as well, because they're the ones who know best what they're going to need and can really help us think about solutions.
Candidate Yates.
I want to expand on one of the things that Erin mentioned. That's the Middle Income Down Payment Assistance Program. I actually wrote that program with consultation with real estate brokers and bankers, and I convinced my council colleagues to approve it, and we took it to the voters, and the voters overwhelmingly approved it. So thank you very much for your votes on that. Let me tell you a little bit about the program. Up to 30% of the purchase price of a house, if it's got to be a middle-income house and a middle-income family, and those are very well defined, up to 30% of that purchase price will be loaned by the city as a down payment. The interest rate on that loan will be exactly 0%. It'll be a 0% loan with no debt service and does not have to be repaid for 15 years. This will help middle-income families get into the housing that they need if they qualify for a mortgage, but they don't have quite enough to make that down payment. Now, that is a program that we just launched in August. It's early to tell whether that's going to be successful and whether we need to make tweaks on it. And so what I'd like to do over the next 2 years, if I serve as mayor, is to take a look at that program, see what its success is, what works and what doesn't in that program, and make adjustments so that we can ensure that it does what it sets out to do. Thank you.
For the next question, we'll start with Candidate Brockett. Since many of Boulder residents are renters, would you support the creation of a city board or committee to strengthen tenant protection?
I might even know who this question came from, but that sounds very promising. We have a portion of that. We were talking earlier about our eviction prevention and rental assistance program, and that's governed by a board of 5 renters in the city. And so I would love to see them potentially expand their purview to look at additional forms of tenant protection as well. We do have a strong tradition of tenant protections in the city. I know sometimes colleagues around the region will come to me when they're thinking about expanding their programs. They say, hey, we know Boulder does really well in this area. Do you have any advice for us? But there's always more to do. There's certainly often a power imbalance between a landlord and a tenant. You can see that in many circumstances, and a particular one is in our manufactured home communities where people will own their manufactured home but be renting the lot. And often, sometimes there can be abuses of power by the owners of those parks. So definitely an area to expand on here, and would love to collaborate with folks in the renting community to see what we could do.
Candidate Spear.
Yes, absolutely. I tried to make this a work plan priority for this council. We did not get quite enough support to move forward with that, but I will bring it back. More than half of the residents in our city are renters. This is a really important issue. Many of them are feeling that they are disempowered, do not have the rights to push back against their landlords. This is especially true in our immigrant communities and especially in our undocumented immigrant communities. We have landlords in the city and property managers that are taking advantage of people's lack of knowledge, of their inability to come forward with issues that are present. And I think this is especially as we move toward having an older community, we really need to work on how we're creating an environment that is welcoming for immigrants so that more people can live here, so we have the workers we need, so that families are creating vibrancy in our community. So yes, absolutely.
Candidate Yates.
Well, as Aaron said, we have a board right now that helps us adopt policies around rental properties. We also have a housing advisory board, which also delves into this. 53% of our residents are now our renters, and we need to continue to ensure that they are protected because there is an imbalance between them, the renters, and the landlords. That imbalance is most great when it comes to mobile home parks. One thing about mobile homes is they are not mobile. And while a renter who gets evicted from an apartment may have to suffer through a move, a mobile home tenant has no option. If their landlord increases their rent significantly, they have no ability to move their mobile home effectively. And so while the state prohibits rent control in Colorado, and the city of Boulder cannot impose rent control right now, one thing I would very much like to do, and I'm going to look to Judy Amabile, our state representative, soon to be in the state senate, and encourage the state legislature to at least allow rent control and better protections for our mobile home tenants. Thank you.
Candidate Tweedley.
Yeah, people are understandably nervous about their lot rents going up in a mobile home park. And I think there are some things that we can do here. For example, we've got some great mobile homes around here in Boulder. My favourite one is the one in Mapleton Park there. It's on Goose Creek by the bike path. And my girlfriend lives there, and the lot rent there is like $360, very reasonable. And also, they've got a 100-year deed or 99-year deed with the city. So it's not as if developers can come in there and buy it and sort of raise the lot rent. It'd be interesting to sort of see if we can encourage that kind of business model to be adopted in some of our other mobile home parks.
For our next question, we will have 90 seconds to answer. We'll start with candidate Spear. Do you support safe zones for kids, measure 302 on the ballot, that would prioritize the removal of tents, encampments, propane tanks from 500 feet of schools and 50 feet from multi-use paths? What is your solution to providing a safe place for our school children and those who want to safely use our sidewalks and paths? 90 seconds.
Thank you. I do not. I will be voting no on 302. And there are a number of reasons for this. I'll just speak to a couple of them. One is that the areas around our schools are already prioritized. They are second in the list for cleanups. And I completely understand that people are frustrated with the situation on our bike paths and in our public spaces. It is incredibly frustrating. I have had people jump out at me while I'm on my bike. I have seen people yelling and screaming and all of this too. It is scary, and I understand that. The issue is that homelessness in our community keeps rising because we have a fundamental problem with affordability. That is why we are seeing more and more people on our street. We are enforcing our camping ban. In fact, we're enforcing it twice as much as we were last year. And yet the problem continues because homelessness continues to grow. There are evidence-based solutions to solving homelessness, not even minimizing it, solving it, getting to a functionally homeless-free city. There's a strategy called Built for Zero that our city is participating in. We are working on it, but it won't be fixed overnight. In the meantime, we do need to provide places for people to go, and I'm sure that some of my colleagues here will talk about all the things we've done on this council to provide more safety for people. But continuing to perpetuate an ineffective policy with homelessness growing will not help.
Candidate Yates.
Finally, something we can disagree on. I am in favor of ballot measure 302, safe zones for kids. Our kids are our most vulnerable residents. They have to go to school. Why would we force them to go to school in an unsafe zone? Here's how it works. We have a civilian cleanup crews that clean up encampments when they appear illegally in our parks and along our pathways and near our schools. And the way that our cleanup crew prioritizes those cleanups, because there's far more for them to clean up than they have capacity, is they score an encampment on a scale of 0 to 100. And the number of points allocated to school proximity is between 5 and 20. 5 and 20 on a 100-point scale. If this ballot measure passes, and I hope it does, what city staff can simply do is increase that 5 to 20 to maybe a higher number, 30 or 40, so that areas around schools are prioritized. Now, I know that there are people who are opposed to ballot measure 302, including a few up here on this dais. And one of the things I hear most frequently is, this is a failed policy. We shouldn't continue a failed policy of cleanup encampments. You know, that'd be kind of like saying, you know, enforcing our speeding limits are a failed policy, because you know what? We get people tickets and they keep on speeding. Well, you know what? We have criminal laws, and sometimes people break them. And when they break them, crimes need to have consequences, and we will continue to enforce our laws and clean up our encampments so that our vulnerable children can go to school safely.
Candidate Tweedley.
Yeah, these guys need to be removed from the streets. They need to be arrested and removed.
Yes.
Well, there's nothing I can do, buddy. Come closer. Come closer.
Closer to the mic.
This is as close as I can get without eating it. So, I mean, I was watching CBS, Colorado, the TV this morning. There was a news reporter. A Boulder man was attacked by a homeless guy, and he was badly beaten with a stick. The Boulder guy's name is Marius. He used to work at Whole Foods there. Really nice guy. Here's the thing, it's not just our children that are under threat, right? It's our wives. It's our grandmothers. It's like, you know, this cannot go on. And I agree, right, let's say we get tough here in Boulder, right? You know, what are they going to do? They're going to go to Denver or Longmont. That's not solving the problem. Here's how I'd solve the problem. I'd pressurise the state, because it's a state, really, job to create work camps for these people who are on drugs, and for whatever reason they're broken human beings. Well, if you're convicted of vagrancy, you're shipped out, you're sentenced, and then you're shipped out to that camp where they can get the assistance, the help that they need.
Candidate Brockett.
Yeah, so I am not in support of this ballot measure, and here's why. And protecting our kids and our schools is incredibly important. And the reality is that we already highly prioritize the area around schools for encampment removals. Now, back in March, the city got behind somewhat. There were some staffing problems. There were 3 exploding propane tanks, which was really scary. Those were near Boulder High. So the city changed its protocols to more highly prioritize areas around school and Boulder High in particular, and to immediately confiscate propane tanks that are found out in the open. And also a second encampment cleanup crew was added around that same time. And while there are still significant issues, as we all know, progress has been made, but we need to continue that focus around schools. The problem is that this ballot measure equally prioritizes areas near schools and within 50 feet of sidewalks and multi-use paths. That's something like 80% of the city. So it, rather than focusing on schools, it actually prioritizes almost everywhere, which potentially shifts the focus from schools. I don't think it's well-written policy. And I think fundamentally, in order to make a real difference in these areas as well, we need to give people additional solutions so that they have, if you don't have a home, you have places to go other than the creek path and the parks. And so we're working on opening a day services center, adding additional permanent supportive housing, and working towards additional mental health and substance abuse treatments as well, because those are actual solutions. Thanks.
For the next question, we'll start with candidate Yates. In 2021, the voters of Boulder rejected the Bedrooms Are for People ballot initiative that would have changed the city occupancy limits for unrelated people. But just this year, the city council voted to increase the occupancy limit for most housing from 3 to 5 unrelated persons. Do you feel that the city council's recent action on occupancy limits was sidestepping the democratic process? Why or why not?
Yeah, I was opposed to that, and I was on the losing end of a 6-3 vote. I think if we are going to increase occupancy, we need to achieve our goal of affordability. Just increasing a number does not increase affordability. So while I was happy to have a discussion about increasing our occupancy limit of unrelated people from 3 to maybe 4 or 5, I was only willing to do that if there was also an affordability covenant, if the landlord was required to guarantee that rents would be affordable to those 4 or 5 people. I suggested that to my council colleagues, and they rejected that. And that's what we lost on a 6-3 vote. I also suggested that areas near the university, which has the highest impact by unrelated people, be exempted from an increase from 3 to 5. That was also rejected on a 3 to 5 vote. And I think it also disrespected the decision of the voters in 2021. I led the opposition to Bedrooms Are for People. We won that ballot measure. A majority of you decided that occupancy increase should not occur. Yet this council, 2 years later, sidestepped that and overruled the will of the people. I think that's disrespectful, and I hope that on the next council we have an opportunity to adjust occupancy. Thank you.
Candidate Tweedley.
It's a total outrage. I mean, here's the people speaking, and then elected officials overrule them. Oh, it's terrible. But here's the thing, city ordinances. Do you think anyone really cares what you specify the upper limit is? People will just take care of their own business without the municipal politics making a whit of difference.
Candidate Brockett.
Yeah, so I was in support of the increased occupancy, and I do not agree with saying that it's disrespecting the will of the voters. The Bedrooms Are for People ballot measure was a very specific proposal that tied the allowed occupancy to the number of bedrooms in a building. And during the various forums and debates in that election season, I heard many, many people say, hey, we need some form of election reform, or occupancy reform, but this is not it. There are problems. People build a whole bunch of extra bedrooms. There'll be a warren of unsafe housing, et cetera, et cetera. So I heard there were many, many people who said we need occupancy reform, just not like this. So we took a deliberate approach. We reached out to the community. We listened to folks. When we passed the increase, we did it with some exceptions for older houses that already had higher occupancy limits. I think, and fundamentally, the reason why we're doing this is because there are so many folks in need out there, young people who cannot afford housing and who cannot find housing. 60,000 people commuting into our town every day. So people are in need, and we responded to that need with that change. Thanks.
Candidate Spear.
Thank you. I'm going to say ditto to everything that Aaron just said. That is exactly how I felt as well when I voted yes on occupancy reform. I do want to touch on just another issue that I've brought up quite a bit, being a member of the LGBTQ plus community, is that occupancy limits defined based on a legal definition of family are fundamentally unjust. And if the only way we have of dealing with concerns around noise and trash and weeds and things like that is to discriminate against people who don't always define family the way that other folks do, that is not a law that we should have on our books. So there are times many times in our city and our country's history where legislators have voted against things that were fundamentally unjust. And that is, I do echo everything that Aaron just said. But also for me, this is about justice. Thank you.
For the next question, we'll start with candidate Tweedley. Do you commit or do you support raising the minimum wage for Boulder higher than the statewide minimum wage by June 2024, effective January 2025?
This is going to be unpopular with the voters, but no. Why? Politicians love to meddle with the market, right? And it's like, what do? They always just make it worse. Let the market do its job, and because not all jobs are worth the same. If I'm applying there to Safeways, to return carts, I don't expect to be making $20 an hour. If I was flipping burgers in Burger King, I would expect $20 an hour. So it really depends on the job and what employers are prepared to pay that defines the market. And when politicians get involved, it's just someone ends up out of a job.
Candidate Brockett.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, I'm in support of this initiative. I think we want to make sure and do it with outreach to various members of the community and stakeholders, as well as to try as hard as we can to get as many other cities involved. The county already is raising their wage this year, but we should work with cities like Longmont, Louisville, Superior, et cetera, so that we can come up with a regional minimum wage that hopefully is the same or very similar. But folks are in need. They're struggling to get by every day to afford food, childcare, rent, et cetera. So I'm definitely in support of giving folks some additional income through this mechanism. I will just say, I mean, I hope absolutely for January 2025, it might not quite get passed by June. Maybe it's July or August. I don't want to make any promises I can't 100% keep, but very much in support of the initiative overall. And while I have the floor, I just want to thank our city staff who are here on a Saturday morning, devoting their personal time to supporting this forum. Thanks so much to those who are here supporting the effort.
Candidate Spear.
Yes, I do. I just want to also level set expectations. I'm not sure that having something passed by June is exactly the timeline we can follow, but I absolutely want to get something that would take effect by January 1st, 2025, because we're already waiting another year to raise wages. To the point that some labor may or should be paid less than others, all labor is critical and important to our community, and every worker should be paid enough to cover the costs of their basic needs here in our city. As Boulder County is one of the counties with the highest costs of living in the state, we should also have one of the highest minimum wages in the state, and I will be pushing for that in these regional efforts.
Candidate Yates.
Yes, I do support increasing the minimum wage effective January 1, 2025. A recent change in state law allows the cities, preferably on a regional basis, to increase their minimum wage over the state's $13.65 per hour by up to 15% per year, and that's what I would support. I'm also happy that we're doing this regionally with the cities that surround us, Longmont and the other cities in Boulder County. I'm also happy that we are giving small businesses, restaurants, and nonprofits plenty of advance notice and consultation, so that 14 months from now, when this goes into effect, January 1, 2025, they have plenty of time to plan. I am supportive of increasing our minimum wage. I want to do it in a thoughtful and thorough and consultative fashion, and I am so happy that the state is allowing us to do this. Thank you.
For the next question, we'll start with Candidate Brockett. What is some of the most useful criticism you've ever received?
People told me I respond to questions too slowly. Well, I'll just mention, I don't know about most ever. That's a little tough. I just think of all the mentors, my parents, and things like that over the years. Just recently, I've gotten some feedback from colleagues about that it would be helpful to share opportunities to get out into the community and speak, like at events, ribbon cuttings, and things like that. And I thought, wow, these invitations often come to me, but it would be great to share those with my council colleagues. And so I've started to do that where I can, to invite other people to participate in events and speak at them. And it's something that I would do more of next year. But I do, just in general, I have to say, when people have criticisms for me, I try to listen deeply and take that into account. We never know that we're doing the right thing in every situation. So it's really important to listen to your friends and your colleagues and people who are opposed to you and take their points into consideration, think about doing things better and differently. Thanks.
Candidate Spear.
Thank you. I think some of the most useful criticism that I continue to receive, I don't mean to say that I have arrived where I'm intending to go, is really criticism about where my white privilege shows up, particularly when I'm working in social justice spaces and working for trying to make our city a little bit more equitable. One of the pieces of advice that I get from friends sometimes is that I do try to prioritize the comfort of people who are privileged over the discomfort of people who are living with less privilege in a very inequitable community. And I always do try to take that to heart, learn so that I can avoid repeating those mistakes, because it's only when we start inviting more people into our spaces to help us make decisions that we're going to be able to solve many of the problems that we're facing.
Candidate Yates.
We're all flawed. We're good at some things and not so good at others. And some of the best feedback and criticism that I've received from mentors through the years is to display kindness. I do have a kind heart, and I am a compassionate person, but sometimes that doesn't always show up on the surface because I get frustrated, I get angry, I want things to go more quickly than they are, and so sometimes that comes across as unkindness, and I apologize if I've been unkind to any of you who are listening, but I'm learning. And I'm learning how to share my values, how to share my compassion, the compassion I really do have in my heart, in a way that's positive and constructive and kind. And I retired from a very high-paying job 12 years ago so I could serve this community. And I need to continue to remind myself that as I serve this community, I need to do it with a smile on my face, with kindness, with listening, with gentleness, so that I can be the most helpful human being that I can be to others.
Candidate Tweedley.
I'm not a sensitive guy. I can take criticism. Here's a funny thing. So, last Saturday we were at a dinner party, me and my girlfriend, and she was criticising me. And Donald, who was hosting it, he was saying, Paul doesn't like criticism. She was saying, I'm giving him constructive criticism, okay? I'm trying to help him. And then Donald says to her, Sandra, there's a fine line between constructive criticism and nagging.
For the next question, we'll start with Candidate Spear. What are your plans to allow Boulder to be less reliant on cars? The elderly, handicapped, moms with children cannot realistically get around without a car unless they live right in town.
Thank you so much for this point. It is a really important one because we do talk a lot about reducing our dependence on cars, and that does make a lot of people in our community uncomfortable who cannot bike, who recognize that our sidewalks are not always in the shape that they need to be for people to get around if they're walking or using mobility assistive devices like wheelchairs. Some of the work that we've been doing to create more ability for neighborhoods to be more, to have a more mixed set of uses where people can get around more easily to grocery stores, to their work, their homes. All of that is really important. I also really appreciate some of our partnerships with organizations like Via Mobility that are providing services, transit services to people in the community who are using wheelchairs and other mobility assistive devices or have trouble getting around. I think those kinds of partnerships are going to be really important as we reduce our car dependence in the city to make sure that our city is still accessible to a lot of the people who can't get around with other means.
Candidate Yates.
Cars will always be with us. Seniors need to use cars, families with children, people hauling groceries and large purchases, tradespeople. But I'll make an observation. Cars are hard and people are squishy. And when they interact, it usually turns out badly for the person. I have a horrible scar on my left arm to demonstrate that. One of the things I'm very proud of during my 8 years on City Council was advocating for 20 is plenty. That was reducing the speed limit to 20 miles an hour in our residential neighborhoods. And statistically, a person is 5 times more likely to survive a interaction with a car if the speed is 20 miles an hour rather than 30 miles an hour. And in parallel with reducing our speed limit, we need to continue to make biking and walking safer and easier with traffic laws and street designs. Now, not every neighborhood is going to be a 15-minute neighborhood. That's unrealistic. And some people will always need to use cars. But we can reduce our reliance on cars so that people who do walk and do choose to bike can do so more safely.
Candidate Tweedley.
I think we're doing a great job here in Boulder as far as, transportation, bike paths, bus routes, roads, and the safety as well. I think the city's Department of Transportation, they should all get pay rises. But, what can we do better? Well, here's one thing, you see all these wee green scooters. Is it Lime, they call them? And they're littered all over town, you see. I think it's a great idea. You just jump on one, put your phone in, I guess it's to your credit card, and it takes you where you want to go. I see a lot of the kids using them as well. But of course, what's going to happen? The first snow, yeah, the first ice, these little wheels aren't going to find any traction. Anyway, we need to keep exploring different ways to satisfy our Boulder residents.
Candidate Brockett.
Yeah, so Boulder is a very bikeable city by American standards, but we've got a long way to go, so we need to continue to add more protected bike lanes. I was excited to see on Baseline just recently the addition of some high curb protected bike lanes, which is a new thing for our city, and they're actually painted with beautiful art as well, and so they're beautifying our city as well as increasing safety for cyclists. And we need to increase access to e-bikes for people with all income levels because e-bikes are a great way, for example, for families to get around. And you can fit all the kids and the cargo and such on them. So I'm proud of our e-bike voucher program that we've had in the city this year. Look forward to continuing that in future years. But recognizing that not all folks can bike around town, so we need to make sure that we have better safety for people using wheelchairs and such. I had a great conversation with the Center for People with Disability recently about just this, while also increasing transit. I recently helped us get a $25 million federal grant to do bus rapid transit in a regional bikeway between Boulder and Longmont. So lots of pieces to the puzzle.
For our next question, we'll start with Candidate Yates. How would you determine if the Basic Universal Income Pilot Program is effective or not?
Yeah, so by way of background, we launched just very recently a guaranteed income program where I believe up to 200 families, low-income families, can receive $500 per month to help supplement the income they have, and sometimes they don't even have income, so they can pay for basic needs like groceries and rent. And I think we'll check in on this every 6 to 12 months and test those families, those 200 or so families, and how they're doing. You know, what are the incidents of success? Are their children getting childcare and health care? Do they have enough to eat? Are they less likely to be evicted and lose their homes? Comparing that to all the other families who are also low income but simply don't receive that $500 per month. And I think if we can see from the data that families that are receiving this guaranteed income program, and many other cities have tried this and have found great success, then I think that we can then, with good faith, look to our taxpayers and look to our community and say, you know what, we had some really, really good results here. Let's continue this program and let's expand it.
Basic universal.
Oh, Candidate Tweedley.
I'm still. Basic universal income program. This isn't the first time, guys, that this has been tried. You know, communists try this all the time. And yeah, if you want to see how it did, well, just look at Soviet Russia. You know, where people like, there's a saying there, they pretend to pay us and we pretend to work. So yeah, that's what happens when you introduce communism. How many times? But you know, it's always year zero to communists. It's just like this time at work. It wasn't implemented correctly, whatever. It's happened before. It'll always happen in the future. Be in your guard. Don't fall for it.
Candidate Brockett.
Yeah, so this is an exciting program that I've been assisting with. I'm a member of the Mayors for Guaranteed Income network that is in communications with each other about how these programs have worked in other towns. And I'm excited to say that one of the important components to the program here locally is really careful tracking of the success of the program. And so we're going to be looking at outcomes for the families that participate in things like increase in food security, maintenance of housing, access to additional educational programs, access to childcare, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll be studying kind of all the different aspects of it and look at what was successful about the program and what maybe was less successful. We're anticipating some really good outcomes, and my hope is that we can take the lessons learned from the careful studies of it and use that to help inform similar programs in other cities, but also how we would maintain and expand it here locally as well.
Candidate Spear.
Thank you for this question. You know, I think some of what my colleagues have mentioned in terms of the more traditional metrics are things that we will be tracking and that I'll be looking at. But more than anything, what I'm interested to learn from this program is what is the qualitative impact on people's lives? Do they have more time to spend with their children? Do they have more time to sit around and have a meal together because they're not having to work 2 or 3 jobs? Are they having more time to spend in community and to give back to community, creating events, spending time in their children's schools? All of these kinds of things are the sorts of variables that we may not think to look for, but that I think are critically important, because fundamentally what I hope this program does is make people's lives a little bit more easier and allow them to move through their days and their weeks and their months with more financial security and less stress.
Our next question will start with candidate Tweedley. Every year, it seems Boulder's population is growing. Do you believe there is a limit to growth because of housing, water, and transportation?
Yeah, clearly there's a limit. And we need to grow. We need to grow as a city. It's very desirable because, let's face it, we love it here, and anyone that comes here loves it, and then they want to move here. So, but yeah, we need to grow as a city, but it used to be managed better. I mean, it's just like now, there's a flood of developers coming in here, throwing up these unsightly boxes and charging a fortune for them. So we need to be a little more strict about how we grow. That's all I'm saying.
Candidate Brockett.
Yeah, well, certainly there's new construction going on, and we see that all around. But to be clear, actually, in 2021 and 2022, according to the Census Bureau, our population actually declined a little bit by a few hundred people in both of those years. But yeah, we have strong growth controls in the city of Boulder, and they're there for a reason. We have a proud history with the blue line that doesn't allow water above a certain elevation, with our strong growth boundary, with our height limit. And we need to continue all of those, right? And those give us the parameters within which we work. And so we can still be like a vibrant, thriving community that allows for some level of change and some addition of new people that wouldn't be able to live here otherwise, without breaking through those growth controls. So Boulder has always been a slow and steady in this kind of way. I think our average increase in housing over the last 20 years has been 0.6% a year. And we have opportunities to increase that, and particularly by creating more of the 15-minute, vibrant, walkable, mixed-use, bikeable neighborhoods that I've been talking about. So modest growth for new opportunities for people while keeping our strong, slow growth traditions. Thanks.
Candidate Spear.
Thank you. I think this is not so much for me about whether I think there's a limit to growth, but how we manage the growth. So our population has doubled in the last 30 or 40 years, but in the next 20 or 30 years, it's only going to increase by about 25%. The rate of growth in our state is slowing substantially. For me, I see this as a bit of a problem, because in that growth, we're going to see the population that's 65 and older growing by a factor that is 7 times higher than the population 65 and under. Where will our workers come from? Where are we going to find the people who are going to contribute to the sales tax that supports our housing and human services and fire and things like that? This is why I think it's so important that we get our city to be more equitable and to focus on bringing in more people from other countries, because I don't know how we're going to have a workforce otherwise. The climate crisis is always also going to be leading to migration, and we need to be thinking about how that's going to impact our city. This won't be in my lifetime, but it is coming.
Candidate Yates.
This is one of those areas where anecdotes and data seem to conflict. People have a belief that we're growing very, very rapidly. In fact, we are not. Aaron had the numbers right. Our average growth over the last 20 years has been 0.6%. That's 0.6% a year. That's a small fraction of the growth we see in surrounding communities, and that's intentional. We manage our growth. We are a slow growth town. And while there's always new construction going on, often that new construction is replacing buildings that are taken down. And so often it's a bedroom for bedroom exchange. And so our growth has been slow. I'm happy about that. It's been managed. I'm happy about that. I'm in a guys' breakfast group, and one day they were complaining to me about, Boulder's growing so fast and you're ruining my town. And I went around the table and I said, geez, when do you think Boulder was at its best? And they said, the day I moved here. And most of us are not from here, right? And we need to continue to welcome people who are not from here because we were welcomed here at one point in time. So we need to continue to provide housing for people who want to move here, grow slowly, and grow in a very managed and positive way.
For our final question, we will start with candidate Brockett. What will you do as mayor to bring our community together and reduce the acrimony and polarization that Boulder is experiencing? You have 90 seconds.
I appreciate that question. Let me just start by thanking the League of Women Voters for hosting us today, and Martine for your very able and capable moderation, and Effa as well for being a co-host. So this is something that's near and dear to my heart. Like, we need, our society is so increasingly polarized, certainly at the national level, very much at the international level, at the state level, and we need to provide better examples at the local level. And I think by and large we do that. I think if you've listened to the four of us up here tonight, we're not throwing stones at each other. You know, we're disagreeing on certain things, but also bouncing off of each other's ideas. And that's how our council has been working. You know, that there are differences of opinion. That's healthy. It needs to stay that way. But at the end of the day, I have always striven as mayor to bring people together that, okay, yes, we are going to disagree on things, but let's disagree civilly. Let's find the best outcomes for our community. Let's explain our differences out into the community as a wider whole and go out and work together equally with everybody. We can do better than what we see out there at the national level. We are, and I promise to continue to work towards that. Thanks.
Candidate Spear.
Thanks for this question. I think one of the most important things we can do as a community is really to invest in and create more social infrastructure. These spaces in our community, like our libraries, our recreation centers, our senior center, that are really bringing people together. That is part of the problem, especially coming out of the pandemic when so many of us were sitting alone just with our computers with social media. It's really easy to get isolated and to not have an understanding of how people who are not like us are living in our community. But the more we have these types of community spaces within our neighborhoods that are easily accessible, places where everyone can get to, the more we start to come together and recognize our shared humanity and the ways that we are very similar, more similar than we are different. I think supporting the library district, that was a big way that we are investing in our social infrastructure, and I would really like to see us continue to make those types of investments, look forward to how we can create more of them, because the more we're coming together in these shared spaces, the more we are getting to know each other as people, as humans, and the less we demonize and try to separate ourselves from each other.
Candidate Yates.
You know, we're often going to have disagreements, but your question really was about acrimony, and that's where you disagree in an uncivil way. One of the things I've learned during my 8 years on council is oftentimes people don't have full information. They don't understand what's going on. And often if you have a conversation with them and they understand what's being planned and what's being projected, they're often a lot much more calm, and we can have a civil and positive and constructive debate. I've tried to engage the community the best I can during my 8 years on council. I publish every month a monthly newsletter in which I forecast for folks what council is thinking about doing and encourage them to write back to me. I started something called Chats with Council and Walk with Council, where we can kind of engage with each other. We receive about 18,000 emails a year, city council members do. I try to respond to each and every one of those. I hold office hours on Thursdays so that people can come in and talk to me privately one-on-one. And I think that that level of communication, that level of conversation, when we can look at each other in the eye, we can have a conversation. We may still disagree at the end of that conversation, but at least we will have done that in a civil and positive and constructive way.
Candidate Tweedley.
Yeah, we are becoming a polarized nation. You know, we're fighting. And, you know, does that often you see people just like, you know, repeating their ideology, and they're just talking across. They're not communicating. I don't know what we can do about it at the city council level, but one example is Coach Prime, Dion Sanders, who's he's got the bye week, so we'll see how he does next week. But he inspires his players. It's so obvious. He inspires the town. I think it's our job, you know, as Boulderites, well, to keep Boulder weird, but also to inspire each other to be the best we can be.
On behalf of the League and our community partner, Emergency Family Assistance Association, I would like to thank our candidates, not only for their participation in tonight's forum, but also for their participation in the democratic process. Running for office and serving as an elected official is hard work. Thank you to all of our forum volunteers and the Boulder City Clerk's Office and Channel 8 for their essential help. And a huge thank you goes to our 2023 election sponsors, C. James Lovett, Simmons Family Fund, Laura Holloway, Maria Dolores Young, as well as our corporate sponsors, Elevations Credit Union, Christina's Luxuries, Gigi and Company Pet Products, Wolfgang Boulder, and Rags Consignment. And finally, thank you to our forum audience, whether here or viewing on TV or online. It's up to all of us to make sure we respect and work to protect our democratic processes. We encourage everyone to get out and vote. For more information about the upcoming election and the candidates, please go to the League's premier voter information site, vote411.org. And remember, democracy is not a spectator sport. Thank you for coming. And as we adjourn the forum, please join me in a big round of applause for all of our candidates.